Friends, today's NRSMI program from Los Angeles brought to you commercial free by listeners like you. Your generous donations make possible for us to stay commercial free, and today's show is pre-recorded. If you have a question for the guest, please send an email to nrsmi@gmail.com. We will follow up with the guest and find the answer for you. Thank you for your support.
Friends, welcome to NRSMI. This is your host for today's show, Srihari Atluri. Friends, we are going to talk about a different kind of guest. We have never heard this type before. She's well educated, but now she's choosing a different type of career or a different kind of path. So Yamini is with us. She's actually moving to farming, and she's interested in natural farming and organic farming, so we'll find out more about that. We want to, because this is unusual, that a woman entering into farming, especially with having other options to do. So she's we think she's doing out of her interest, her own interest. As you know, farming is not going well in India. We are hearing a lot of issues for the farmers, and especially with the credits, loans, and yield, and whatnot. So Yamini, welcome to NRSMI.
Hi Srihari, thank you for having me.
Excellent. Yamini, to begin with, could you please tell us some background about yourselves and what triggered interest in farming?
Yeah. Well, I was born and brought up in a town called Tenali, also well known as Andhra Pradesh for its prominence in arts, freedom, and fashion. Both my parents were state government employees and are retired now, and I grew up with a brother, and I'm raised by my great grandma, Sri Amprala Sitaramamma, and she's no more with us. But that's my family background a little bit. And coming to my education, I did my diploma in computer engineering, bachelor's in economics, and master's in human resource development. And I started my career in marketing, moved on to software development. Also worked in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, USA for a company called APAC for a few years, and then came back for good in 2008. I'm married to Raj.
So you moved to US at some point for your job?
Yeah, in 2000.
Okay, 2000, and where was it?
It's in a town called Cedar Rapids in the state Iowa.
I see. Okay.
And after moving back, I'm married to Raj Shekhar, an assistant professor in computer engineering department of Geetham University, Vizag. And that's a little bit of my education and what I did for a living all these years. And coming to my interest in agriculture, I guess I have it in my blood. Meaning I've been so inclined towards greenery from the beginning. I enjoyed plants, trees, and played on them and around them. And I was surrounded by them everywhere as I grew up as a kid, be it at my home, at school, and on the way to school, and all the public parks in Tenali where, I regularly used to go and play with my brother and neighbor kids. And I used to enjoy, even visiting my relatives' villages and their farms during holidays and thoroughly enjoy them. And we used to have farmland in our grandparents' generation, but they have lost them for various reasons. So no, I didn't grow up in the farming scenario, so to speak. But my great grandma, who raised me, used to do farming, and she raised her grandkids in her village. Anyway, my interest in green kept growing along with me. As I looked around, the biggest social issue that caught my eye and moved me was farmers committing suicides all over AP and India. And, I also kept studying the causes and the direct relation between the increased costs to cultivate versus uncertain yielding. That means increased inputs and lowered outputs, so to speak. And the impact of buying everything, including seeds, fertilizers, and pesticides, and all the increased cost of labor, machinery, fuel, etc. And also the growing of chemical usage and its direct impact on the soil and the end users alarmed me. And with all this things going on in the background, the one thing that set me off to come to a conclusion that yes, this is my passion and I should step into farming, is that I read a book called One Straw Revolution, written by a Japanese guy called Masanobu Fukuoka. And boom, I have fallen in love with natural farming. Till then, farming was an option and I wanted to buy farmland. But after reading this book, I wanted to do natural farming. And then I bought a farmland with my savings, attended some initial training by an organization called CSA, Center for Sustained Agriculture, and also Subhash Palekar, an ardent natural farmer and preacher. And I learned a few things about soil, water, manure, and how to begin, and started farming. Yeah, that's a little bit about my background and how I started farming, etc.
I see. So, since how long have you been doing the farming?
It's been a year, so I'm still an amateur, experience-wise in this.
I see. Excellent. And you, um, how did your family respond? And how did your husband and your parents and your friends, how did they respond when you say you wanted to do farming?
Yeah, some were excited, some were concerned, for a reason, and some knew me and said, "Yeah, that's Yamini, so knock yourself." So, well, I have a track record of thinking on my own and deciding what to do with my life at every stage. Soon after I became independent and simply informing my family and friends instead of asking for permission. So I have a reputation for that. Well, they initially discouraged, rightfully so, that though farming is a noble profession, it has become very tough in the recent times, and you can't handle this, so why bother? Was their initial reaction. But then, upon seeing my determination, they came along eventually and supported me as I struggled with my new profession. So, yeah, they're with me.
Excellent. Um, I think the only person I heard before, a woman who's choosing farming as a career. I actually don't recall the name. We did an interview with her. She's in Tamil Nadu. She's also doing organic farming. But have you heard anyone? And did anybody inspire you? Did you think, okay, if she can do, maybe I can do too, or you just started off by yourselves as
Um,
far as a
yeah, well,
woman farmers? Yeah.
I really don't. Okay, when I look at a profession, I don't see it as whether I can do it as a woman or not. Same thing with marketing. Everybody pretty much discouraged me. You're a woman. Marketing is not the field for you. But I excelled. I did all right. But I typically don't see something that I like as okay. As a woman, can I do this or not? No. I look at it as I like this, so I want to do it. So, and then I'll find out whether I can do it or not. So, but then coming to the women farmers that I know, well, I should first mention my family. As I mentioned, my great grandma who raised me, she was a farmer. And then another woman in our family, she's also a grandma in relation to me. She's actually my aunt's mother-in-law, so she's an inspiration. It's like an inspiration, but it's not very. It's a subtle inspiration. I grew up in
Right.
this. I grew up in this. With these people. So, and in the recent times, another family member that I should mention is my aunt Rani. She's actually cultivating nearby. She's doing an excellent job in farming. So this is within my family. I look to these women as farmers and my inspiration. And outside the family, I get inspired from Vandana Shiva from Tamil Nadu,
Right.
who is fighting for seed sovereignty, And some of my friends like Shamla Sanyal, she's from Nagpur. She actually runs a factory and has been cultivating, in natural farming for the past 3 years.
Excellent.
And yeah, and there's another woman I should mention is Kranti from Vizag,
Hmm.
who also has been farming for the past 4 years. She returned from USA and took up farming in her ancestral land. And another lady I should mention is Madhu Reddy from Hyderabad, who also came back from US and converting her ancestral mango orchards to completely natural, in the natural farming way, etc. So I see so many people reaching out to me and all these friends every day to express their interest in farming, women I'm talking about,
Yeah.
and see it as their future. So I'm not alone in this, and definitely not the first one to do this.
Excellent. Actually, I was mentioning about the woman organic farmer in Tamil Nadu. Her name is Revati. I
I
just
see.
recollected. We did an interview with her, and actually we did another interview. Um, their um, their company is called um, A4 number 4 A4 Mangoes. I think that's how
Oh,
it is.
okay.
And they returned from Dubai, and it's wife and husband actually. They took up organic mango orchards in
Mm-hmm.
I think somewhere in close to Hyderabad, I think.
I see.
So yeah, I mean there are quite a few. Actually, women farmers have been there. Like you mentioned, your great grandma was a farmer, so they have been there. But my question more towards a software engineer or someone who worked a, in a corporate sector and went back. So, but it's good to hear that there are other people who are doing and you are actually connecting with them. So that's great. And how did you connect with all these folks after you are interested after you thought of entering into farming, or you kind of knew them before itself?
Yeah, it is after. It's after I decided I want to do farming, and as I started meeting people, or as I started going to a few trainings here and there, I started meeting a few of these people, and then we're all connected now, and we share our ideas and experiences every day with natural farming.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very good. Um, but farming itself is generally considered as a losing proposition, right? I mean, that's you mentioned about suicides, farmer suicides.
Mm-hmm.
So because you mentioned about the high input cost versus low output, low profit or no profit.
Mm-hmm.
So what made you think that you can make profit, or you can make a living out of it?
Um, as any business, there is a risk, right, of losing money. But then there are so many factors that are outside your control in farming. Uh, and as any other problem, you have quite a number of solutions. You just have to look out, search, research, and then implement new ideas and solutions to come out of these problems. So while it's a valid concern, yes, agriculture is in general considered as a losing proposition, but it has its own reasons. Let's look at the reasons first why people think the way they are thinking right now. Uh, as we discussed about this, it's increased inputs, or everything is bought, and sometimes at low quality, like seeds. Sometimes they're available, sometimes they're not, and then even if the seeds are available on time, some are not of good quality, so they don't germinate. So that's about the seeds, saplings, fertilizers. It's the same thing. Sometimes you get it on time, sometimes you don't, and they cost more. And pesticides, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And labor. Labor is a very costly affair now, and it's very volatile. You may get it on time, you might not. And machines also same thing. They need maintenance and everything. And the credits or the loans they take for ridiculous interest rates. hoping that they would get some profit and then repay. So this is all about the increased inputs, and then the irregular weather patterns, or we talk about untimely rains. Um, for the rain-dependent agriculture, which there's a lot of there are a lot of farmers who do that. You know, all these irregular weather patterns, untimely rains. Some are natural, but some are self-imposed by global warming caused by cutting forests and trees, mining and reducing hills into rubble, growing pollution, etc. We can talk about this subject alone on and on, but I'm not going to do that yet. And then monocropping. That means, lack of diversity. You just say if it's a paddy, then it's paddy for 20 acres. If it's maize, you plant for 50 acres. You cultivate 50 acres for maize, and etc. So there's monocropping. That means you're cultivating one type of crop alone, and not you lack of diversity. So that means it has its own problems. First of all, there's an increased pest problem. And dependence on one crop yielding, what happens? It doesn't yield properly, and then the rate at the market at the end of the crop cycle. So if it's just one crop at the end of the crop cycle, when you actually harvest, then what happens? The rate drops down at the market. That means you won't get profit. And then even when the yielding is great, the middlemen fluctuate the markets, farmers syndicate to lure the farmers, and these are all open secrets. Everybody knows. And direct marketing has been lacking on the farmers' part. Even the farmers' co-ops are supposed to do this, but they become politically influenced rather than working for its members' benefits. And last but not least, I don't know whether we can expect this, but there's no proper support from government to store their goods and in fixing a minimum support price which is higher than the cultivating cost, etc. So there are so many reasons like this, and there is no another major reason is the power problems. First of all, okay, if you're purely rain dependent, then you're pretty much totally dependent on the rains. But even if you have dug bore wells and you have power connection, a motor and pump set to get the water to irrigate the farm, you're at loss then because you hardly have any power during the day. So there are power problems, and so there are irrigation issues, water not available, even if you have the bore wells and stuff like that. So with all these things, if a farmer is getting a profit, then we call him lucky, because all these things are set for failure. Well, hence the struggle to break even, let alone gain profits and be able to repay the loan. And what happens? This repeats year after year. They break down at some point and let it go. So while these are all the gifts, I'm just being sarcastic here, the gifts of green revolution, its impact is felt by everyone, especially farmers today. We have moved far away from our traditional farming. Our forefathers were practicing before the so-called green revolution, who used to have cattle and farmland and followed sustainable farming practices. They've grown healthy food for everyone around. And coming to whether do I fear that I lose my money? Well, I don't have any fear of losing. Even if I lose in my initial years, I know that the natural farming works for sure because I focus on soil enrichment. No matter what type of land it is, natural farming works. I hear a lot of success stories. Trust me. As it's just like out there in the world, you hear a lot of gloomy stories, but you also hear some good news. So the same way, I hear a lot of gloomy stories in farming, but I hear a lot of success stories following natural farming. It just takes some time, and I'm not afraid of losing some money initially while in the process of enriching the soil, as I mentioned. I look for the long-term guaranteed returns. That much I can say. And I lost money, in my first year, more than what I'm supposed to, only because of lack of hands-on training and practical experience. So I would suggest anybody who wants to take up farming as their new profession, especially natural farming, to go and work on somebody's farm who are successful in natural farming. gain some hands-on experience, how to plan and prepare natural fertilizers and pesticides, and then start working on your own farm. So this will help you a ton. This will reduce losing money a little bit in the beginning. But I would say, yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid of losing some money in the beginning. But then there are a lot of success stories that tell me that, yes, this is a very profitable proposition if we do it right.
That's excellent. Actually, you mentioned so many issues in the beginning of your answer. I thought you were trying to scare new people coming into this, but it's good to see your confidence and and you have a plan, uh, to get this going.
Right.
But you also mentioned, I mean, most of the issues, I mean, a lot of the issues you mentioned, some of them are in your control and some of them are not in your control, right? Like market conditions or middleman and or woman, middlewoman, and the support from the government and so forth. A lot of things that are not in your control. So are you preparing for those as well? You talked, I think what's in your control is probably the input cost. Even the labor probably is not in your control, and so that might also change. Your input cost might change because of the labor availability and not. So how do you plan to manage those things? I'm asking because if there are any listeners out there who are interested and if they want to jump in, maybe they can get some perspective. I know it's a short interview, they can't get everything out of it, but
Right. Yeah, I'll try to make this as brief as possible. But let's discuss about power problems, for example. So we depend on the conventional power, and so we depend on the government to, supply the power at a reasonable rate and reasonable hour. But instead, I think we can look to alternatives, like solar power, for example. People like us, who come from a little bit of I would say, better financial background. I think we can afford to experiment with some of the alternative power solutions. Even though they're a little bit expensive at this time, I'm hoping and I'm really hoping that they would come down a little bit on price so that we can do more experimentation and then show the other farmers that we can do this way. We don't have to depend. So for every problem, for every issue, as I mentioned, there is a solution. We just have to take time to dig into it and then be brave enough to experiment with it. You talk about market cost, middlemen, market fluctuations, etc. Again, I said direct marketing is something that the farmers lack. Farmers are really good at what they do. They produce, they grow, but at the end of the day, you need to market your produce. So that's something that we as farmers need to pick up. We need to find the end users or the clients or the customers upfront before we grow some produce. So that means we need to create the market and produce and supply to that market, and that's direct marketing, without any middlemen. And that actually needs to happen a lot, which I don't see yet. We talk about what are the problems we were talking about, the seeds, for example. We don't have to buy seeds. We can, if we are not using the BT seeds, etc. If we are using the native seeds, we can produce our own seeds and we can save some of the produce for the next plantation. So we don't have to buy that. We don't have to buy fertilizers and pesticides if we can make our own fertilizers and our own pesticides with whatever resources available on the farm. And cattle is very important in natural farming, especially cows. The dung and the urine is very frequently used in fertilizers and in preparing natural pesticides. And labor and machines, we have labor. Yeah, you have some problem here. You just need to find out a reliable person or or a couple to be on your farm and share your burden. on day-to-day activities. That you just have to do it. Somehow find somebody to do that. And coming to reducing labor, we can do that. I mean, we don't have to find labor for every activity on the farm. We can buy small implements, to weed in between the rows, and to even plant. I mean, there are some. It doesn't have to be big machinery, because the huge machinery doesn't work for our type of lands. So we just have to look at some of the smaller implements that we can use. Instead of 10 people weeding on the farm, we can use one person with a small implement. We can weed with one person in an acre a day, so to speak, instead of 10 people. So we can't really eliminate labor, but we can reduce labor, so we can keep and retain quality labor. So we just have to now take the help of machines a little bit, along with people. We just have to combine that. So what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, for every problem there's a solution. You just have to have time to look around and experiment.
I see. That's excellent. That I think that certainly gives hope for anybody listening. But also, if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm interested in this. I want to jump in." Um, so, how much? What kind of commitment are they looking at? How many years do you think it'll take for somebody to kind of settle down? Because you talked about enriching soil. It begins from enriching soil, and there are a lot of it's different stages, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's no surprise. I mean, I get contacted, and some of the people that I know are being contacted every day. Especially NRIs and people from IT sector. They're showing a lot of interest in farming, and it's a more than a welcome sign. And I really feel happy about that, because when farmers, who are into the conventional practices, when they're leaving farming, some new blood has to come in and fill in, that has no fear of losing, no fear of experimenting, and can take advantage of technology and things like that. So, but I urge people who are entering farming from a more well-off background, so to speak, to consider natural farming and not use any chemicals to grow produce. At least the produce consumed directly by end users, like vegetables and paddy and things like that. If you can afford some losses initially, stand tall for a good cause, and that good cause need not be as fancy as world peace or something like that. It could be as simple as giving a natural and no chemical diet to your children and children of other people just like yours. The next generation deserves good food and environment. Just don't spoil it for short-term gains. So that's what I would do. But then, we talked about the major roadblocks, and you asked me how many years. It depends. It depends on the type of soil. It depends on the type of resources available. It depends on the type of person. How fast can they learn, and how steadfast they can stand. But I would say, give or take, a thumb rule would be 3 years to break even, and then I would say 5 years to start seeing some profits.
okay. Yeah, now I can relate, your marketing coming into the picture. Even for any small business, they say 3 to 5 years, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so you mentioned about natural farming. What is, I think you touched on several issues, but what what is called a natural farming versus what is a conventional or a chemical based farming? Where do you draw the line?
Um, Let me just give you a little bit of my perception on this, because there is a lot of controversy in how you use some words.
Yeah,
What is conventional farming? What is traditional farming? What is organic farming? And what is natural farming? And things like that. So
right.
we know that traditional farming was what our forefathers used to do. No chemical farming, that was. And the conventional farming, as we call it today, is what we're saying is chemical farming, using chemical petro-based fertilizers and chemical fertilizers and pesticides, etc. What I used to, there's a lot of confusion between organic farming and natural farming. In my opinion, this is again my opinion, is that to make it simple, this is how I understood the terms. Organic farming is also natural farming, but you're buying resources from outside. That means you're not buying chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides, but you're buying organic pesticides and organic fertilizers from outside. So you're just replacing chemicals with natural, but the process remains the same. So you're not making on your own. You're just buying things from outside.
I see.
In my opinion, natural farming is something where you don't have to buy anything from outside. Right from seeds, you grow your own seeds, and the fertilizers you make your own, using your own cattle, and all the green manure that you can grow on your own farm. And pesticides, again, the same thing. There are so many natural remedies to pests, especially the decoctions that you can prepare on your own and store them for a year or so. You do it once and then you store them. So there are so many things you can do natural way, but in my opinion, natural farming is something where you don't have to buy anything from outside. Everything comes from within your farm.
And there's also a lot of regulation, government regulation and industry regulation on what is natural versus what is organic, whether you can put those labels on it or not. And I don't know about India, but certainly in US and other places. I'm sure in India also there is regulation, but I don't know how far it's followed.
We actually, let me tell you just a simple thing about that. We don't have our own process for this. We also follow USDA practices for this.
Yeah.
It takes 3 years, and you should not use any chemicals for 3 years consecutively, and you follow certain procedure. Like what I was talking about. How you enrich your soil and things like that. So after 3 years, they take samples, from your farm, and then they see whether there are any chemical residue that they can find, and also they they document the process that you're following to enrich the soil, to grow crops and things like that. And it's the same type of certification here too. After 3 years, you have to jump through hoops and go through tons of documentation, and pay a lot of fee to get that stamp on your produce, so that you can sell under the label of organic produce. So there is a lot of jump through hoops, but if you want to export, or if you want to sell it for a real high premium price in metro supermarkets and things like that, you have to worry about the certification. But if you're keeping it a little smaller, that means you're growing food for your family, your neighbors, and your friends, and some local marketing, you don't have to really worry about all the certifications. And that's just my perception. But yeah, again, if you're thinking about exporting under organic label, or if you want extra premium price for that, etc., then yes, you have to think about the certification. And there are some organizations called 24 Mantra, etc. If you are your neighbor farmers, if you in one area, if you have like 100 acres of organic farming methods practiced, then they come to you, they buy whatever produce you grow, and they help you all gain this organic certification. They pay the fee, and they do this documentation and everything for you. So there are some organizations that help you gain the certification and buy the produce from you. So yeah, I mean that's how the certification works here. Instead of going independently, if you can group people together, it works better.
Excellent. Um, so I think if somebody's, you know, plan to do organic farming, maybe they should look for other farmers who are doing around the same area and kind of buy land next to it and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. Maybe that's a good idea.
Oh yeah.
Um, I think I think one of the biggest concern about switching from chemical based to organic or natural farming is the fear that we will not, that the food that's grown would not be sufficient for the population growth we had last few decades. What would you say for that?
Um, Before commenting on that, let me tell you a simple phenomena. Like with chemical farming, whatever they claim that the production is great now and we are able to feed the world and etc. These are the lies we bought from the Green Revolution. Maybe initially they worked fine, but what we lost was we lost a lot of diversity. I mean, with chemical farming came a major issue came into the picture is that the monocropping. We plant paddy for acres together, and then we plant wheat for so many acres, and we reduce so many varieties in this in paddy itself. We used to have so many varieties of seeds, and we reduced down to maybe 5 or 6 now. So what we lost in the name of chemical farming and the name of green revolution is the diversity. And again, is conventional farming a success? Yes, initially it might look that way to us. This is again a more conceptual based argument or the discussion that we can have on some other interview. But this is the basic thing. Okay, if I use 10 bags of fertilizer per acre this year, next year I would have to use 12 bags of fertilizer to get the same output. And then the coming years, I would have to keep increasing the number of bags that I use, fertilizers, to get the same output. But after a certain time, the scenario would be working in a reverse proposition, in a way that, okay, you would need to increase the fertilizer bags, the usage of fertilizer bags, but then the output keeps reducing. What's happening? I mean, it should work, right? So,
Yeah.
but what's happening is that we are depleting the soil. We are not caring about the soil at all. So instead of strengthening our own body, I mean, let's talk about in terms of human body. So instead of making our own bodies healthy, we depend on medicines and vitamin tablets, vitamin tablets every day. What happens to you after year after year? So the same thing is happening with the soil. Instead of focusing on enriching our soil, we lost focus, and then we started using medicines or instant boosters of energy and things like that, the temporary solutions. And along with that, we're losing. These are the things. We deplete our soil fertility. We contaminate our water resources. There are immediate danger to the health of consumers, and then there are increasing pest issues. What happens to the pest? As we use fertilizer like urea, and there is a lot of sugar content in it, so the pest is attracted to the plant, where the urea is used, and that's how, again, that triggers another set of things, that we need to use pesticides, right? I mean, there is pest, we use fertilizer, there is an increased pest, and then we have to use pesticides. We use pesticides at one dosage, right? And what happens? All the weak pests die, and only the stronger ones remain, and they reproduce to make more stronger ones. That's how they develop immunity to the pesticide. So whatever the dosage you use is not enough the next year, so you have to increase the dose, and the more stronger ones retain. So after some time, you can't really control them; they become really strong. So that's what is happening with the fertilizers and the pesticides. And with the monocropping, for the pest, it's an ideal environment, so they're just attracted to the monocrops, and they stay there. And as we don't change the crops, that means, okay, this season uh, we're doing maize, right? We're growing maize, and then immediately the next season we grow maize as well. So what happens? It becomes a permanent home for the pesticide, for the pest. So instead, we need to do diverse cropping. We need to switch crops every season and do all these things, but we don't do it. And then the overall economy issues with subsidy on chemical fertilizers. Right now, we're able to uh, afford chemical fertilizers only because the government has a lot of subsidy on them. And once the subsidy is lifted off, then we won't be able to afford it. It'll even make it worse. The, that makes the input cost increase multiple times, and it's about to happen sooner or later. And then the decreasing yields, irrespective of increased usage of fertilizers over a period of time, as we talked about, and then increased costs, and then the decreased or negative net revenue. So that means what we are spending is not what we get at all. I mean, there's not even break even using these chemicals. So and then there's an increased abandonment. I mean, as we don't get anything from farming, why would we do that, right? So
Yeah.
farmers abandon farming, or they migrate to the cities or to other farms as a farm labor.
Friends, NRSMI is a non-profit independent alternate media from Los Angeles, USA, which brings positive stories from grassroots activists from all corners of India and across the world. Among others, we focus on stories of need for equality, inspiration, environment, health, and politics. NRSMI does not rely on corporate funding, and thus our shows are commercial free. We only rely on your donations. Please consider donating to NRSMI, and all donations are kept transparent on nrsmi.com.
So I was talking about all the problems that that's triggered by chemical farming. Initially that might look green, but as the time goes by, that's not a permanent solution at all, and it causes so many issues. Um, like again, I was saying, depleted soil fertility and contaminating our water resources, an immediate danger to the health of consumers because we use pesticides a lot, right? And increased pest issues. And there is a demand to use more and more fertilizers over a period of time. And the overall economy issues with subsidy on chemical fertilizers because there is a lot of burden on government to give the subsidy on the chemical fertilizers. We don't know how long or how far are we going to afford that as a country. And then
Yeah.
there's a decreasing yields irrespective of increased usage of fertilizers over a period of time. And so it takes more bags of fertilizer every year, so it increases costs, and then the decreased net negative revenue and increased abandonment. So people abandon farming, they migrate from villages to cities. So the villages are being deserted, and the cities are getting crowded. There's a lack of balance in life in general and in the overall society. So I mean, there is a long-term losses and long-term issues that we need to think about when we think of chemical farming. And the same way with the natural farming, it's completely reverse. I mean, it may not seem like profitable in the beginning, but as the time goes by, you'll see the results of it, and it's like a healing process once again.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, yeah, I think those are a lot of issues, but I think it's a good direction that you have taken, and also very inspirational. I think more and more people, like you mentioned, more and more people will look this as a alternative career, and hopefully profitable in the long term, and
Hmm.
more people will come back because, as you said, right now the migration is happening. At some point, somebody needs to go back, otherwise we won't have any food.
Absolutely.
I think we are close to the end of the interview. Do you have any message or anything else you want to share before we wrap it up?
Well, I mean, I'm I'm not that big to give messages, but I request. it's my sincere, humble request to anybody out there who's interested in farming, and uh, I would request you to consider natural farming as a principle. Even though you don't see so much profit, it might be discouraging in the beginning too, as you take this path. But don't be discouraged. I mean, there are a lot of success stories. One can go out there to youtube.com and then look for Bhumiputra videos. Bhumiputra is a TV show hosted by Ma TV, and that's one of the brilliant programs that they have is that they showcase one or two farmers who's actually practicing natural farming principles, and then very successful. So they show success stories of natural farmers and how they're doing it and what is their main method of doing it, etc. So there's not one way, there are so many things. So please go out there and watch those videos, so you'll gain some confidence that it's not all loss. And also it's very important to find a network of people with the same ideas and ideals. I'm fortunate that I'm not the first and not alone. A few people in my network include Praveen from Hyderabad, who specialized in vegetables and paddy, Vijay Shekhar, an elderly gentleman farming in Bobili, Ravindra Babu from Vizag, again paddy, and Jagdish from Vizianagaram. You won't believe this guy Jagdish. He just passed out BArch, bachelor's in architecture, and he just jumped into farming and took up natural farming. He's doing so great than all of us, in the same batch. So again, don't be really don't be shy in taking up natural farming. And then I mentioned already Kranti from Ramadrapuram and Ramkrishna from Makwa, to name a few who are practicing natural farming to their best ability in the surrounding area. Again, it's easy to get distracted, discouraged, and misguided, and it's easy to give up on natural farming if you're not part of a network who have the same ideas and similar ideals, and better yet, have some experience in dealing with the practical issues on the farm. So find some travelers with the same destination and go along for a relatively easy and joyful journey called natural farming.
Excellent. That's a very great message to wrap up our show. Friends, it's great talking to Yamini. She is, as you listen, she moved from corporate sector to now farming, and she's doing the natural farming, and she's encouraging more people to jump into it. Thank you, Yamini, for your valuable time and inputs. We appreciate all what you had to say.
Thank you, Srihari, and thank you, NRSMI, for having me. And I hope it'll be helpful for some people.
I'm sure it will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Friends, if you liked today's show, please go to youtube.com/NRSMI and click on the subscribe button. You will get notified every time we publish a new show. And you can also like us on our social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and Google.